Hello everybody, so today for our tour of the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens, we're going to be starting off with this honey mesquite, the scientific name of which is Prosopis glandulosa. And as you can see here, it's got some very interesting leaves. This is going back to what we talked about on escapism. It has very thin leaves to avoid excess surface area to preserve water. And then you can also see here we have one of its seed pods. You'll be comparing this to the preserved specimen. And aside from that, what's interesting about the tree is it's got a 30-meter deep taproot to help it access water locked away deep in the ground. And aside from that, this is our first stop on the tour. And here's our next stop on the tour. We have Agave lechuguilla here. So this is a succulent, which means it has a great ability to store water in the flesh of the leaves right here. This is a very slow blooming plant. It takes about 5 to 50 years to fully mature, and it blooms in the spring. The interesting about lechuguilla is that it's actually an indicator species for the Chihuahuan Desert, so its range actually encompasses most of the desert itself. So this is a great way to know if you're in the Chihuahuan Desert. Alright, and on our next stop on the tour, we have Opuntia imbricata, otherwise known as the cholla, or in this case, the tree cholla. So what's interesting about this is, like all other cactuses, it is a succulent, so it has a system for storing water and conserving water during droughts. In our area, the flowers on this would be about a magenta or a purple color, and they usually come out around May through July. This one in particular, as I just said, May through July, all the flowers are dead, but you can kind of see the purple color on some of these flowers that are still on here. However, we're a little late in the season to get their true glory. And for our next stop on the Chihuahuan Desert Garden Tours, we have the Opuntia plant, otherwise known as the prickly pear cactus. Now, this is found in the Great Basin, Chihuahuan Desert Garden, and Mojave Desert, and what's really interesting about them is that they are succulents, so they have a water storage system. Also, they are infected by these little cottony white insects called cochinal, which you can actually see right here is this kind of white dot right there. And what's interesting about that is it was actually used to make a dye by the Native Americans a long time ago. Now, the other thing that's interesting about the Opuntia is you see these red fruit everywhere, and you can see a couple of them have fallen off, are eaten by both humans and animals. And as we can see here, they've got a very interesting color and a ton of seeds on the inside. Hello everybody, and for our next stop on the tour, we have here a red yucca, also known as Hesper aloe parviflora. So what's interesting about this is, like cactuses, it is a succulent, so it has a water storage system in its leaves. The leaves, as you can see, are very long and narrow and end in this sharp spike. And what is interesting is when it blooms, it'll actually grow a central spike in the center of the plant that will grow up, and the flower will actually bloom from that. However, we're out of the season right now, so it doesn't have that right now, unfortunately. And for our next stop on the tour, we have this wonderful ocotillo here. The scientific name is Focaudia splendens. What's interesting about this is that it will actually drop its leaves several times in a year, all based on water availability. So if water is plentiful, it'll grow leaves like it has right now. However, if water is in short supply, it will actually drop the leaves completely, as you can see with the very large ocotillo that the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens actually has over there in the corner by the staircase. And this is a great example of escapism, as we previously talked about. The plant drops its leaves when water is not available, and then it regrows them when it is available. And now we have this wonderful tree known as the desert willow, scientific name Chelopsis linearis. So what's really cool about this is it has a late summer, early spring bloom, and that will attract hummingbirds and carpenter bees to this plant. However, we're a lot out of the season, so as you can see, we don't have any wonderful visitors here. And the other thing that's interesting is it has a very deep root system to help access deep reservoirs of water. And what's really interesting about this is it was actually used as an antifungal agent by Native Americans for many years before modern medicine came around. Now for our next stop on the tour, we have sitting over there what is known as Agave neomexicana, or the New Mexico century plant. Now, this is a cactus succulent that, like all other succulents, has a system for storing water to conserve water during dry periods. What's also interesting is that it's a very long-lived plant. It can take many years before it blooms, but it will flower ideally between the months of June and August. And now here we have a very pretty plant known as the desert marigold. And what's interesting about this is that it actually will bloom all year round, as we can see right now. And it'll actually reseed the ground all year round as well. So it's a very hardy plant. And for our next stop here, we have the creosote bush, which scientific name is Larrea tridentata. And what's interesting about this is it has a very wide, shallow root system to help it absorb the water as soon as it penetrates the ground. It blooms in the spring. And one final thing that's very interesting about this plant actually comes with these seeds right here. So as you might be able to see or not, they're very fluffy and very furry. And originally it was thought that the carpenter ants were mimicking this. However, after they did some initial studies and they looked at heat exchange, they found that being fuzzy like this was actually a method for both the velvet ant and the creosote bush to spend their excess heat.
Hello everybody. So the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens actually was missing a few of the plants, or they were just not present. So we're going to quickly go over them right now. Apologies for this. The first one we're going to talk about is known as Parkinsonia aculeata, otherwise known as the Desert Palu Verde. So what is interesting about this, it has very small leaves and green bark, as you can see in the second picture, which allow the plants to photosynthesize with no leaves. Thus the leaves remain on the tree only for a short period of time before falling. The next one we're going to be going over is Yucca treculiana, otherwise known as the Torii yucca, and this is found all in the Chihuahuan Desert and Sonoran deserts in Arizona in the United States, and is a slow grower that flowers in the spring. And finally, the last one that we're going to be talking about is this plant whose scientific name is Tecoma stans, or yellow bells, and this flowers throughout the year. It occurs throughout warm subtropical Americas and can be found growing on very dry slopes in the Franklin Mountains. Native Americans also use the stems for bow woods and the roots for treating venereal diseases, actually.